Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? It's your boy, The Doc, and we're back for another injury update video. It's where I go through all the injuries from last season, tell you about how I feel about them from a recovery standpoint this offseason and heading into training camp this year. If you haven't already, go back, check out the quarterback and running back videos that I've done already on the channel. A lot of good information there for those positions, but this week, it's all about the wide receiver group. We got a lot to talk about, and at the end of this video, I'm going to give you the one wide receiver I am not drafting in fantasy this season, and you're not going to want to miss it. Let's get into it. All right, so the first guy we're going to be talking about today is Cooper Kupp. He's coming off a hamstring strain, actually missed the first 4 games of last year, and it allowed Puka Nacua to step in as a wide receiver 1 for those weeks and really establish himself as a name in the fantasy football scene. Now, with both of them on the field at the same time last year, Kupp saw a considerable dip in his targets per game from over 11 per game in 2021 and 2022 to just 7.9 last season, a 3 target per game dip. He also had a 15-yard per game drop in his average yards per game last season compared to his career averages. So Kupp did see a significant step back in terms of targets and yardage with Puka Nacua on the field with him at the same time. Now, from a price standpoint, that's already been baked in though. Kupp is currently going outside the top 20 wide receivers on Underdog. The bigger problem that I see with Kupp's profile is that he's missed 13 games over his last 2 seasons, and he's entering his 31-year season. So he's 31 years old. He's not playing full seasons anymore. The team is being very precautious when he does get hurt, and I think that that means there's a good chance that we will see Cooper Kupp miss games this year at some point. Now, I don't expect him to return to the heights that he had in that 2021 season where he won the receiving Triple Crown, but I do think that he could still be a viable wide receiver 2 or 3 for the season and your fantasy teams, depending on where he's going in drafts. What I've seen so far is that in Underdog, they're going to tend to skew him more towards the lower half of the wide receiver 2 market, but he still holds a lot of name value in regular fantasy drafts. So if you're drafting with your buddies, just know Cooper Kupp might be going outside of what I think is a comfortable price range for him this season. All right, the next guy that we're going to talk about is Christian Kirk. Now, Christian Kirk revealed in an interview last season that he had been playing with a torn groin for a few weeks prior to his week 13 abdominal muscle tear and full adductor tear that ultimately ended his 2023 season. After surgery and an entire offseason to recover, he's expected to be 100% at the start of training camp. Now, Kirk is the de facto wide receiver 1 in this offense, but he does have new competition in the form of free agent signing Gabe Davis and rookie first-round pick Brian Thomas Jr. I'd expect that those 3 are going to have a primary role in this offense in some way, but I do think that Kirk has a bit of an edge, having already built rapport with Trevor Lawrence from a wide receiver 1 perspective. Now, from a fantasy standpoint, it's worth knowing that through 12 weeks, Christian Kirk actually was the wide receiver 23 in PPR last year. It's not like he wasn't producing at a high level when he was healthy, and he's going as the wide receiver 30 currently in best ball drafts. So I feel like there's still plenty of opportunity for him to be a good wide receiver 3 value for you this season and probably pay off at that price tag. Every year we have wide receivers that are coming off of injury that we just know are more likely to get hurt than others, and one of those guys is definitely Mike Williams, coming off an ACL tear last year. I'll admit I rarely, if ever, draft any player coming off an ACL tear the year before, but Mike Williams at least has a recovery timeline that would benefit a early return to production if the team is able to ramp him up. Now, a week 3 ACL tear is way better than a week 13 ACL tear, so he has the timeline on his side. Again, we're looking for that 12-month recovery timeline to get back to prior level production when it comes to ACL tears. That's not always the case, but it's a good benchmark to look for. Now, he's being drafted outside the top 60 wide receivers on Underdog right now, so the price isn't terrible. And Williams said in March that he expects to play in some capacity in week 1. Now, all the players think that they're going to play in week 1. It's rare that we see somebody say, yeah, I'm not going to be ready week 1, especially not all the way back in March. But head coach Robert Saleh came up and said afterwards that he is putting Williams on the same kind of timeline that they had Breece Hall on last season. Now, Hall did start in week 1, but is 8 years younger than Mike Williams. So there's a lot going on here that could impact his recovery timeline. I'd expect that we will see the Jets limit Mike Williams' reps if he's ready by week 1. And if he's not, I'm not surprised if they put him on a PUP list, at least to start training camp, to give them the option to place him on the reserve PUP before the season starts. Another guy that seems to have a history of being injured all the time is Christian Watson, coming off not one but 2 right hamstring strains in 2023. When the dude's healthy, he shows a lot of potential, but he just hasn't been healthy so far in his NFL career. Now, reports are that Christian Watson's troublesome right hamstring musculature was actually 20% weaker than his left side, and that was back in 2021. Since then, he's been trying to close that gap to 8 to 10% now, and he's working on getting it down to 6%. We know from a medical perspective, having one limb with a significant muscle difference from side to side leads you to all sorts of issues from a compensation standpoint and an injury perspective. We typically see those play out with guys that have ACL or Achilles tears on one side. They tend to be more prone to these hamstring types of injuries. But obviously, Christian Watson's injury history is mostly just these hamstring issues. Now, the good news is that besides the fact that he's missed the 11 games over his first 2 seasons in the NFL, when he's healthy, he is electric. You know, we scored 12 touchdowns in 23 healthy starts, but those have been few and far between thus far. Watson's currently going outside the top 40 wide receivers on Underdog and has the combination of youth, potential, and clearly an effort has been made this offseason to fix these hamstring issues that I still think he's probably worth a flyer at that price tag as kind of your wide receiver 4 with a little bit of upside. But I'm not reaching for a guy like Christian Watson, just knowing that the history is likely to still follow him at least into this season and maybe next year. Now, I'll be the first to admit that covering injuries isn't always the easiest thing to do with the NFL because they're not exactly forthcoming with the information. So it's not exactly a surprise that I was surprised when Amon-Ra St. Brown admitted in Netflix's Receiver series that he had a torn oblique for most of last season. Despite the injury, he still managed to put together an unbelievable year. 1,500 receiving yards, 10 touchdowns, both career highs, and he missed a game with that. So he could have done even better. While I think it's safe to say that the receivers reporting of his oblique being torn completely off the bone is probably a bit of hyperbole due to his short absence and lack of surgical intervention, it's still an impressive display of toughness from the wide receiver 1 in Detroit. Those dudes have really bought into the bite kneecaps philosophy that Dan Campbell has there. Either way, St. Brown is poised to continue operating as the wide receiver 1 in both Detroit's offense and for our fantasy teams this year. This should be completely healed by now, and I don't really have any concerns heading into 2024. So who's the wide receiver coming back from injury that I'm totally out on for fantasy this year? Sadly, it's Tank Dell. And let me start by saying I don't expect that Tank Dell will have any lingering effects from his fibula fracture that ended his promising rookie campaign last year. He's already been a full participant in the team's minicamp and is expected to be ready week 1 of training camp. Now, practice reports and videos coming out from that minicamp have shown him looking pretty good. He's running, he's cutting, everything looks fine from a mechanical perspective with the ankle. But as long as the team can avoid putting his 160-pound frame on the line of scrimmage, I don't think there's really a lot of concern that he's going to get injured in the same way again this season. No, the problem that I have with Tank Dell is not even about the talent of Tank Dell. I was high on him coming out of college. I really believed he was one of the best wide receivers in last year's class, and I believe he's as talented as they come from a route running and wide receiver perspective. Do I wish that he was, 6'3" and 220 pounds? Yeah, absolutely. But production comes in all shapes and sizes at the NFL level, and he can be a perfectly usable slot wide receiver in this offense. But the problem I have is that Dell may be the odd man out in this offense. All three of Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, and Tank Dell are going inside the top 25 receivers taken in fantasy this year. And I just don't see how that is going to pay off from a fantasy perspective. Dalton Schultz, Joe Mixon, also going top 15 at their positions. Basically, everyone is in on every single position for the Texans this year, and something is going to give. Not all 5 of these guys are going to produce at the level that everyone wants them to. I worry that Tank Dell has the role in the offense that he's going to have. Is he still going to be productive? Absolutely. But is he going to be capped from a production standpoint due to all of the other players on this team that have to get theirs in this offense? Now, the NFL has only had 3 players go for over 1,000 yards in the same offense 5 times in its history. Most recently, the Cardinals way back in 2008. It's just pretty rare that we see receivers producing at an elite level in the same offense at the same time during the season. Now, only 12 times in NFL history have we even seen 3 players on the same offense go for over 900 yards receiving. Most recently, actually last year with the Vikings. Shout out to TJ Hawkinson, Jordan Addison, and Justin Jefferson. But my point is, this would be an unbelievable productive year for the Texans offense. They would have to be elite all time. And I just don't know if we can expect that if all 3 of Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell are healthy. I don't expect that we see those guys all end up as top 24 fantasy producers with them all healthy. I think that Dell has the most to give up from a volume perspective with Diggs coming into the fold. Diggs could be more productive out of the slot as well. So are we going to move a 160-pound 5'8" wide receiver to the outside? I don't think so. I think they're going to be cycling into that slot in those 2 wide receiver sets, and there could be times when Tank Dell just isn't on the field. I'm not saying that's what's best for the Texans. I just think that's what could end up happening given their current personnel. And Diggs is an alpha. That dude wants targets. He wants to be the wide receiver 1 in the offense. Nico Collins just got paid to be an alpha, to be a wide receiver 1 in the offense. Tank Dell is going to have to take a back burner to both of these guys, at least for this season. And for that reason, I'm just kind of out. All right, guys, that's it for the wide receiver injury update video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. We've actually hit our like goals on each of my last 2 videos. So if your name is up on the screen, congratulations. You get a free draft guide courtesy of the doc. If this video hits 650 likes, I'll give away another one in next week's tight end video. We're also going to have some training camp updates, hopefully for next week. So make sure that you're tuning in for that. And let me know down in the comments, who's one wide receiver that you are absolutely avoiding in fantasy this year? I want to have a conversation down there in the comments. I appreciate all the interactions that these videos have gotten, and I hope you guys are having a great offseason with us here at the Fantasy Headliners. Football is right around the corner, so if you haven't, make sure you subscribe to the channel as well. It helps us out a ton. But that's all I got for you guys this week. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.